Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to Skylight Gaming. I just want to show you some Prominence Poker here, playing at the high stakes. As you can see, this is the hand I'm recapping, but I have about 92 mil here at this table. We were playing, I believe it was 10 mil. Yeah. I have some of the usual suspects.
Come on.
So I'm just going to show some clips that I played. This was a hand where, if I remember correctly, I just knew my opponent was a bit of a bluffer. So it was a big pot. I had king queen. So I just called it because I didn't want to actually intend to play a big pot with this hand initially, but I did have a good starting hand, and my thought initially to call here instead of raising was to hit potentially a straight or just win a small pot with king or a pair of kings or a pair of queens. I was not initially going to play a big pot with this hand, and I just wanted to see how people were going to play the hand. I mean, you could usually raise coming out with king queen here. I noticed that when everybody's calling here, it probably would have been a better idea to raise. Since this opponent did raise, he's going to have these players call. Now, I know the players behind me are more tight, so I'd rather raise a little bit just to isolate these two opponents. And I do have a good starting hand, so I know that the players on my right are loose, and the players that are on my left, on the left of the screen, are a bit tighter. So I had a feeling these two opponents would call, and sure enough, they did. Because they're more looser than the other opponents that I was facing. So I have a good starting hand. I'm just looking at it again. So this happened to be a really good flop for me, so I want to throw out a bet. Usually you could check here, but I know these opponents are loose, and they would likely call a continuation bet, thinking I may be bluffing, because I'm known to be a tricky player, so I want to use that reputation to get them to call a continuation bet. And the loosest player basically called me at the table, which he probably has not much of a hand, because since I have queen king, there's only other two queens in the deck, and my kicker is very strong. So with a dry board like 4-5-9, I don't think he has to pair, because you would have to have queen 5, queen 9, or queen 4. The only hand I'm worried about here is queen 9, but because he raised it only 2 mil, I'm not putting him on that hand. And I don't think with a board like this that he has to pair. He could have 4-5 here, which I'm a little suspicious of, but because of all the pre-flop raising, I didn't think he would call all that money, all those chips pre-flop with 4-5. So this 24 million raise, I thought about it, and I thought it was a bluff. Because when I look at the board and I looked at the pre-flop action, I didn't think that he had to pair, so I did call him. And I knew he was a loose player, so this is why I made the call fairly quickly, without thinking too much about it. But usually against a tighter opponent, I would be more considerate of folding. This is that he was quite loose. Here's another clip where I was up against an opponent that was quite loose. And he's a very loose opponent, loose aggressive. You know, he's a bit of a trickster, but I don't put him on premium hand starting off because I know he plays a bit loose. Is this Cheese Puff? I believe he's also Sideshow Bob, but I'm not too sure. So I know he's a loose player. So I believe I have Ace-9 here. I think that's what I had. I'm commenting over these clips after they happened, so I'm just giving you my thought process as to what happened in these clips. So when he raised 2.2 mil, he did this. He was doing this quite a bit in this game as a standard raise. So I didn't think much of it. Against a tighter opponent, I would be more careful and even might fold Ace-9. But because it's a very loose, aggressive player, I wanted to play a big pot here with him because I was putting him on a very wide range of hands. And it just so happened that I hit Ace-9, so I'm going to continuation bet because I know he's likely to call with overcards, which he probably does have. So he may have King Queen, King Jack, Ace King, Ace Queen, Ace Jack, Ace 10. When he re-raised me, I figured he must have a 9. But I have an ace, so my kicker is probably best. So this is why I went all in. Because I put him on a 9, and I know my kicker's best. And he calls quite quickly. So here, he shows Jack 9, which is within his range. And I have the ace kicker, so I have the best hand here. And he doesn't outdraw me, so I win a pot of about 54 mil. But I did have about I had some of those chips were mine, so that's just a good hand. The other players are of course taunting at the table. This is a hand where I was also playing against another more straightforward player. He was not a very loose player. He was more of a straightforward and honest player. He was a little bit tight aggressive. He was not loose. So I wanted to see if I could play a board and maybe I'll play my opponents here. I didn't really intend on playing a big pot with this. I believe I had Jack 9 in this hand. I could look again. I believe I had Jack 9. Let's see what happens here. If I look, yeah, Jack 9. So here, I just call the raise because I'm looking to hit a straight, essentially, with Jack 9. It's not a premium hand, but I'm looking to basically hit a monster, and, you know, that was my intention initially. So this board is not terrible because I have a gut shot and 2 overcards. So not a terrible board for me. Someone could have a 7, someone could have an 8. But I just check because I want to play a small pot. I don't want to get burnt if someone does have a 7 or an 8. And everybody checks. So that means I don't think somebody has an 8 because everybody checks. So here I'm still worried that I'm probably beat. I actually am putting somebody on an ace because they raised pre-flop and they didn't raise on the flop. So they don't have an 8. They could be trapping with a 7. But it's likely that they have an ace because of the pre-flop action. So that 1 mil bet basically told me that I was up against an ace. And I was basically looking at my implied odds here. And I saw like 1 mil. And I could potentially win all his chips if I hit my gut shot. So I call with a 1 mil. This is kind of... Some people may consider this a donkey play to like, you know, call with a gut shot here. But, you know, I have good implied odds. Because if I hit my gut shot, I could also win his whole stack. And because I'm putting him on an ace... If an 8 comes, I could potentially bluff him off the hand because I know that nobody has an 8. Because they would have raised on the flop if they did. Most likely they would have. They wouldn't be trapping here with an 8. So because he raised it, he probably has an ace. And that 8 is a perfect card for me because that means I could probably get him off this hand. Because any 7 or 8 would mean that, you know, he can't call with the ace because he's up against a full house. So I raised a 3.4 mil with my Jack 9. And he thinks about calling, but he realizes his ace is probably not going to beat a full house, so he folds. And then I show my Jack 9. So I was putting him on an ace. So this is a table where I was up against a very loose player. Extremely loose, extremely aggressive. And it was not like 12 mil, it may seem a lot, but I have a fairly large bankroll, so I was willing to gamble in this spot against a loose player who raised it 1 mil. Now I'm trying to isolate him. Well, actually he's already isolated, but I'm trying to raise here because I want to play a big pot and have ace queen. So he calls, and I still don't know what he has because his range is so wide. He has 68 mil here, so I only have 10 mil and he has 68. Now that board looks like it could hit a tighter opponent, but because his range is so wide, I don't know if he hit this flop or not. Now there's a deuce, 3, jack, king, so I could have a gut shot to hit my straight. I'm trying to represent. I was thinking of representing a king or a jack, but I wanted, since I'm in early position, I want to see what he will do. So he raises 3.4 mil. Now normally I would fold here, but because he's such a loose aggressive player, I called because I floated here because I wanted to see if I could, you know, I could raise here to get him off the hand, but I think checking was a mistake because it invites him to bluff. So this was actually a mistake on my part. I should have raised on the river. Now he raises 6.5 mil. Now I'm thinking he could be doing this as a pure bluff, or I could be dominated. I could be completely beat. So this is a very hard call because I think he either is completely bluffing or he has a jack or a king, and this is basically what would be referred to as a hero call if I'm right. And I just make a guess. I don't know what he has, so he has 6-7. He was bluffing. I don't know if this is the best play. I think if I raised on the river, it would have been a better play because I would have got him off the hand. I wouldn't have had to risk so many chips. But I did make a guess, and I happened to be right. This is a hand where I'm playing against a really tricky opponent that we have some history against each other, and we both know we like to outbluff each other. So this will be a fun clip. So here, I'm not gonna reveal my hand. I will. I think I have. I actually don't remember what I have in this hand, but it's interesting because it just makes it more interesting. But we'll see what happens here. I don't know if I show my hand at this point because I don't quite remember what I had in this hand. So I raised 500. Oh, I remember this one. I was not playing against a skull. I had ace queen in this hand. So I have ace queen, and I'm thinking of bluffing this because I thought this board was not within this player's range. Because it's not within his range, I raise 1.5 mil, and I'm basically trying to get him off any sort of low pair that he has. And because it's 9, 4, 4, 3 deuce, I really don't think this board is within his range. And he bets 8 mil. Now, to me, this seems like a bluff. He could have a 9, but with 2 4s out there, I think with a 9, he would be afraid to bet 8 mil. If he really did have a 9, he probably would bet around 4. So after really thinking about it, I considered that this was a bluff, and I basically I'm gonna call here. He had queen 7. I had ace queen. It was one of those boards that didn't seem that it would be within his range, and he could have a 9. But if he did have a 9, he probably would have value betted earlier on to protect his range, or to protect his hand, not his range. Sorry, to protect his hand. Here's the other hand that I had against Skull. This was a really tricky play where I'm basically trying to represent a jack or a king right here, and I'm raising 550, trying to represent a jack or a king. There is a flush draw, and he could be on a flush draw, or he could be playing with air, as Skull is usually playing with air sometimes. Now, the jack on the river is not a great card for me because it doesn't complete a flush. It makes it look like I don't have the jack, and the only other card I could have is a king. So it's actually not an ideal card for me to bluff on. But I still try to bluff this anyway with 1.8 mil, trying to represent. I guess I'm trying to represent a king here because with a jack I may be raising more. Now Skull is trying to represent a jack, so he's basically telling me he has a jack. So he repopped me. But against this player, I know that this is likely something he could do. And he could also be bluffing. So I'm going to repop him and try to represent the jack. But I think I made a mistake by not raising it enough. I raised it 7.8 mil, but it was not enough. Like, he had the right odds to call this if he thought that I was bluffing here. Because it's a weird, like, the story doesn't really add up. It's a bit of a confusing play. And he's very hesitant. He thinks about it. He thinks that this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. He thinks, why would I repop him with king? Do I really have a jack? And he calls me. Sure enough, I don't. And he has ace high. And he just called ace high with a 117 mil. So it was one of those plays where the story wasn't really adding up, and he called me with ace high. Here's another play that's really quite interesting. I'm playing against the same player who is able to detect bluffs. and then Ace is able to bluff himself. So basically, I raise at 190 pre-flop. So my range could be anything. I could have literally anything when I raise 190. 2 aces and a 9. So basically what I do here is I'm trying to represent an ace or a 9. I have king queen. It's kind of irrelevant. I have king high. Well, it's not that irrelevant, but I'm trying to represent an ace or a 9 here, just asking the question if they have an ace or a 9. So I raise a little bit as a small continuation bet. He calls quickly. Skull calls quickly, trying to, like, this is one of those hands where because he calls quickly, I have a feeling that he may be trying to outplay me in this hand because he didn't hesitate to even think. So this player who called, I believe he had a 9 because he's worried about the ace. He keeps looking at his hand, so he probably had a 9 here. If he had the ace, he would continue to play. He checks rather quickly, so I'm putting the guy in the middle on a 9. I think I could get him to fold a 9, but I think this was a mistake to check here because, again, if I was representing that ace, I should have been betting it. Or I could have been trapping with an ace. Now, Skull kind of detected this fishy business with me checking. So he's going to try to represent an ace now himself. And it's one of those situations, again, where the story is not very clear as to what's going on. Do I really have the ace, or am I trapping, or do I have a 9? Do I think he's bluffing? It's quite confusing. The guy in the middle folded a 9. So basically one of us is trying to represent the ace, and it's not clear if either one of us has it at this point because of how the hand played out. So here, we'll see what I do here. Okay, I'm trying to represent the ace, and I'm basically trying to get him to fold here. So I raise it about 1.5 mil or 1.4. Okay, I raised it 1.3, trying to make it 1.4, trying to make it look like it's a value bet. Now, Skull thinks about this for not even a second, and he tries to go all in. Now, at this point, I really think that he probably has the ace, but here's the thing. I'm looking at the odds of this. It's 3.2 mil. There's about 7 mil in the pot. I honestly believe that maybe, like, 40% of the time or so, he may be... Maybe 30% or 40% of the time, he may be still bluffing here. I think I have the right odds to call this, so I do. And he was bluffing in this case. And I called him with king high. It was one of those weird things where it was a loose call, quite loose to call in the river, but because I called mostly because I felt that I had the right odds to call it mathematically. If I felt that he was still, if there was still like a 35% chance he was bluffing. This is just a fun play. Just kind of a low limit for me. I was just having some fun at a 5 mil, and this was just a fun hand. I'm going to show at the end of this, at the end of this clip here. So I know Kimmy. She's a good poker player. Doesn't play really like super high limits. She goes all in. I have 8-9. I'm just. It's not a great play what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to gamble. You know, I just go all in with 8-9, just see what happens, because I'm putting her on overcards, and I figure with overcards, I may have a chance to hit low cards. So I just go all in for fun. I wouldn't do this at the higher limits because I don't consider this a good play. What I'm doing, and she has a low pocket pair, and it's just one of those kind of fun hands we were playing. So she has a low pocket pair of 8-9. So what happens here is I hit 2 pair, which is quite good. You may think I'm in the lead. She has a gut shot. She hits the 7, so she hit a straight, and guess what happens on the river? I hit a full house. It's one of those hands we were all laughing about because it was kind of a ridiculous play. She made the right move to go all in, I believe, because she knew that somebody could call with her 6s, and she was probably like, she probably deserved to win that hand. This was a hand I was playing where I just want to show that I don't always play strangely. Like I usually play straightforward too. So in this hand, I'm playing against Sideshow Bob. His hand range is really wide, and I don't believe he has an ace or a queen. He most likely has an open-ended straight draw, or maybe a 3 or 4, or maybe a middle pair. Yeah, so he had an open-ended straight draw. I called it a pair of pocket 10s. I knew I was up against a player that had a very wide range, so I was not afraid to play this out. A bit of a loose call, but not really. I mean, against this player, it was a good call because of his hand range. Didn't necessarily have to have an ace or a queen there. So the next hand I get dealt is pocket queens. Now, I wanted to get the most amount of value out of this as possible. Now, I know the player with the red shirt will raise pre-flop because he's been doing it the whole game. So I get dealt pocket queens here, and I know I'm going to let the hand play out because I'm talking a little bit ahead. So I get the pocket queens here, and I decide to just call so that I know this player in the red shirt, Sideshow Bob, or what I believe is Sideshow Bob, he will raise pre-flop because that's what he does. He likes to raise pre-flop. And if this player calls, I know she has a good hand. She could have a really good hand here. So I'm going to raise it up because I feel my pocket queens are best here. And I want to play a big pot here because I feel like this is one of those situations where I can mix it up and play a big pot. And because I raised the pre-flop, it's going to be harder for them to fold. So I hit a really good flop. Other than the flush draw, this is a really good flop for me. So I'm going to raise and make a continuation bet. I don't check because I want them... it's going to be hard for them to fold because if you look at the pot was about 19 mil, and I'm raising 3.6. So that's really a low percentage of the pot compared to what the pot was. So they're going to call a continuation bet, trying to trap me. Maybe they have king, queen, king, jack, queen, 10. There's a king, so that's actually a pretty good card for me. Now, if they have something like, if they just hit that king, I'm just going to call with my trip queens. So they were trapping with ace king, but I was mega trapping with pocket queens, and I had trips, and they didn't hit a straight, so I just won a pot of 60 mil or 59 mil there. And, yeah, that was a good play because I out-trapped someone who was trying to trap me, so... So, I believe in this clip, I'm not sure what I get dealt, but we'll see. Let's see what I get dealt here if I look at my hand eventually. For some reason, I have a habit of not looking at my hand right away. I don't know what it is. It's just something I tend to do. Okay, so I have queens. So basically, with queens, I'm definitely going to raise and try to build the pot up. Try to get players to call me. Not too high. The player in the red and white shirt is a bit loose. Same with the guy with the green hair. Oh, so not the green, the kind of bluish hair. The girl is not like the most experienced player, and the guy with the Russian hat, he's a bit tight. So he calls. We'll see who else calls here. Okay, so she calls. So she's loose. I don't think her range is very narrow, so both these players are fairly loose. But that's actually not a good thing because with that kind of a board, they could have an open-ended straight draw. That could easily hit their range with loose players with 7, 8, 9. Now that she bet a mil, I actually thought to myself that she has a straight because she's betting a mil, and the pot was 1 mil. So I'm fairly convinced that she'll bet again, and I don't want to be playing queens on a board like this with 2 hearts. So I believe I fold this here, and sure enough, I do. And now he goes all in. So he either has trips or a better straight. And she calls. So I believe she has trips or a straight. They both have a straight. Well, that's just a cooler. That happens sometimes in Prominence. You can be beat by a better straight if you're on the low end of it. So that was a really good laydown by me. I was quite excited when I saw their hands because I realized like I saved myself a lot of chips there. So that was a fairly good laydown. So this is getting a bit of lag there. I believe in this hand, either I had ace king in this hand or this was something else. I believe this was the hand I had ace-king. So I'm up against Chemist. Chemist is a friend of mine. We play on Prominence Poker. He's a very loose and aggressive player. Likes to basically dominate the table with his aggression. But I don't know why I call here, because normally I would raise with ace-king. I feel like calling here is a mistake. I don't even know the reason why I called here. Maybe I'm hoping someone's going to raise for me. And that's the only reason I can think of me calling here, which I'm very fortunate that someone raised for me, which was a min raise. Which would mean that I'm definitely going to raise here with ace-king, because I'm not going to call this. So I'm definitely going to raise. So it's going to be 700k. I just wanted enough so that it's going to be a big enough pot where people could call or fold here, and I could still get out of the hand if the heat is too much, you know, because I could still fold with ace-king. And Chemist calls. Now I'm only really worried about Chemist because like these other players are fairly tight. Chemist is like the only player I'm really worried about in this hand. He could outplay me here, or potentially outdraw me, which is likely to happen because he's been running pretty hot on this table since he's been catching a lot of the draws when he's been going up against players. So I try to bluff here with ace-king. I just do my typical continuation bet, trying to represent that I have an 8 and try to make it seem like I'm bluffing. Or not, well, I don't know, like it makes it seem like I have a hand or that I could be bluffing. It's hard to tell. They both don't know what I have. I'm pretty sure they don't know. So I could have been perhaps raising with an 8, or I could have been raising with a flush draw and just hit my flush. So I'm basically representing now an 8 or basically a made flush. So I raised 4k, sorry, 4 mil, my bad. I raised 4 mil and now I'm representing a flush. So this, in my ideal view, this should get both players to call. But Chemist is a very loose, aggressive player, and he likes to look me up a lot of the times. He doesn't really believe me because he knows my game and he knows I like to bluff. So I bet he's thinking to himself, I don't know why you're raising so much, but I have a pair or something, so I'm going to call you. And he calls. I don't know. I don't believe he thinks I have the flush for some reason. So he, I believe he raises here on the river. So he's basically making a bold guess that I don't have the flush when he raises on the river here. I believe he's going to raise. And I only have ace-king, so I can't really do anything else about this hand except fold it. I'm pretty curious to know what he has, and he's curious to know what I have, so we both... Well, he shows me his hand. I just tell him afterwards what I had. But he'll probably see this video and then see what I had in this clip. So he'll see that I have ace-king here. So he shows 7-6. Now that was a really bold call from him because he basically didn't believe that I neither had an 8 and well, he had the straight there. So he caught the 5 to get the straight on the river. But at the time when I bet 4 mil, he didn't believe that I had an 8 and he didn't believe I had a flush. So he really didn't believe anything. Like, he basically thought I was full of baloney. Which I was, but it doesn't happen that often. And he got away with a middle pair, which is quite interesting. Let's see if this goes to the next clip here. I believe in this hand I have jacks. If I'm not mistaken, if I look at here, I think I have jacks. So Chemist raises 4. No, I have 7s actually. Okay. I could isolate Chemist. I probably should. Re-raise, but I figured that these players may be tight and just fold the hand. But they both decide to call. And maybe it's more likely because Chemist is raising. If I raise, they would likely fold. But because they know Chemist is loose and aggressive, they're going to call his raise. And they don't see my call as a threat. So I believe I made a mistake there by calling. I should have isolated the chemist and just re-raise him slightly. Like even a min-raise would have been better than calling there. So I'm going to raise 800k to try to represent the jack. I'm not sure what chemist believes I have here at this point. Maybe he thinks I'm full of baloney again, which usually he doesn't believe anything I do. So he's calling. I don't know what he has. He could have a jack, he could have a 6, he could have a flush draw. At this point, I'm going to wait for... I'm in position. This is the beauty of being in late position. Because he checked, I know that he's likely on a flush draw. If he had a 6, he might have raised it on the flop or re-raised me. If he has a jack, he would have definitely raised it on the turn. I know for sure that because he didn't re-raise now, that he has a flush draw. And it's likely a diamond flush draw. So I actually hit a set of 7s on the river, but I know that because of the way this hand played out, it's extremely likely that he has a flush of a diamond flush here in this situation because of that call or check on the turn that he did. Had he bet on the turn, it would have been harder for me to put him on a flush, but I think about this for a little while. I look at my hand, I'm like, yep, it's a set, I know, but I gotta let it go. And I believe I fold this. And I do. And chemist shows the flush. It's a low flush, but he knew that it was probably going to be good. So chemist is the kind of player that likes to chase a little bit. He's loose aggressive. He likes to... Very aggressive player. Hard to bluff because he usually will call you up on a bluff. That's what I have to say about his game style. So here, I believe I have jacks in this hand, if I'm not mistaken. This is the hand I probably have jacks. This was all in one session. We were playing this table with me and chemist. Here I have jacks, so I'm definitely probably going to raise this. I would never call with jacks. I'm always going to raise and isolate players. I don't know if I would never call. Maybe occasionally I may call with jacks, but not often. I'm usually going to raise. So I raised to 450. This player on my left is a very good player, very tricky player, very experienced player, and his range is a little wider than a typical tight player. So I'm more worried about this player than I am about chemist right now. I'm more worried about the guy on my left. So chemist is checking very quickly, so he's basically wanting to give up on this hand, but I check because I don't know if my jacks are good. I decide to float here because I feel like a float would be my best option. So I decide to call and then lead the river. Basically making it harder for him to bluff me on the river. And it's a deuce, so there's no spade flush, flush that came there, no flushes. Doesn't look like there's any straights. So I float and basically bet the river, making it harder for him to bluff me off the hand. And he folds rather quickly, and I feel like my jacks are good. And they are good, so I win the hand. Because my jacks are good. If he had a queen or an ace, he would have called me. Or he would have probably re-raised me. And I would have had to fold my jacks. Had he re-raised me on the river, I would have folded my jacks. But most players are not as perceptive as that to raise on the river when they see a blocker. Only like the top professionals, like the best players in the some of the best players could really detect a blocker bet like that. This was a fun clip I just recorded at the end. This was a clip from a long time ago. But look at this board. Deuce, 3, 4, 5 of clubs. You may think, is an ace of clubs good here? I mean, really, like, I actually am holding the ace of clubs. But what are the chances that he has the 6 of clubs with a board like this? And there's a 7 of clubs. So we'll find out, bro. I have the ace of clubs. I am going to call it for 1.4 mil. Sure enough, he has a 6 of clubs. So my straight flush is no good because my straight flush was beaten by a better straight flush. Hope you guys enjoyed these clips. Take care and have a good one.